So, for those of you who do not know me, my name is Robert Nirenberg. I'm a uh, instructor for Metropolitan Community College. I'm also the program coordinator. My background is primarily in building automation systems, but recently I've also learned how to teach HVAC. You know how it goes. I've been working with the Best Center now for about 6 years, and I'll tell you, for those of you who are new to the group, you really cannot find a better peer support group or just generally a better educational group. Nothing against any of the others, but these folks are really phenomenal. So, my presentation today centers around a challenge that we have been dealing with a lot recently, but a need that really has existed beforehand. Um, and that is using problem-based learning in some sort of a virtual environment. Our specific example, as I'm hoping everybody has already seen the videos series, is troubleshooting an air terminal unit, specifically a VAV box or variable air volume unit, in a choose your own adventure YouTube style. So we'll start off with the need. Obviously, the need started out a long time ago. It's always been a challenge for those of us in education or even in training of preparing students ahead of time to be able to um, properly utilize lab time. We always have students who show up with approximately zero preparation, um, or did the wrong preparation and really aren't ready, and we have to spend more time maybe with that student or that group of students than we had intended. And so we end up effectively wasting precious lab time simply because they aren't prepared or we aren't prepared. Also, in so many of our skilled trades, there's no opportunity to practice a lot of what we teach outside of our labs, because either the equipment is unavailable to the students, or it's not safe for them to practice it outside of the lab. So sometimes we've really lacked that need, especially in teaching troubleshooting skills, which so much are practice based, critical thinking skills, things along those lines. And of course, we've also had need for remote education in these fields. Um, there is not an HVAC program or a building automation system program in every city. Honestly, there's not even one in every state at this juncture in time. So that ability to be able to provide that remote education, even in an incomplete manner, is still a significant need. And of course, in recently, well, 2020, we all know what happened, the pandemic. Many of our schools shut down in a very significant way. Some of us were lucky enough to get lab access back, but in many cases, that was very limited in comparison to what we had before, either in the numbers of students we had or the amount of time that we were allocated for it, or a combination thereof. So the students being prepared for the lab ahead of time becomes even more crucial. And in these situations, many of our students are very hands-on oriented learners. So they may be resistive to using online environments. They don't want to read the book. They don't want to do their homework. So trying to convince them that they need to be prepared for the lab and figuring out a way that works for them to actually prepare is challenging. So in preparation for this, the Winter Institute, we've been talking about how to do a hands-on activity. And the idea kind of came across slowly in my brain. Many of you may remember I was an avid reader as a child and teenager, and still am, honestly. But one of those things that some areas, especially mystery novels, really glommed onto was a choose your own adventure, where you kind of stepped into the shoes of the detective and you got to choose where you would go next in each scene, to try and discover the clues, make choices as to whether you're going to play the good cop or the bad cop in an interrogation, things along those lines. Um, I don't think it ever really took off big, but some people really enjoy it. Um, Getting our youth in on it, gamification. If we can make a game out of something and still be able to teach them to learn, that's a really winning situation, using that natural competitiveness or their self competitiveness, trying to beat their own times, things like that. And of course, using modern technology like YouTube to reach out to students. And so that's where this whole idea came from, the idea of recording a series of videos that presents a problem to the students and allows them to choose which things they want to examine, in an attempt to discover what the true problem is. And for those of you who went through the video ahead of time in the video series, um, it's rough. It's a minimum viable product, but it's a proof of concept that I do think that this has potential to work, not just for building automation system troubleshooting. You could get this into electrical troubleshooting, um, gas furnaces, programmable logic controllers. Many different fields could benefit from this concept. Now, implementation might be a little bit more or less challenging depending on the scenario. But the tools that you need to start out in this are really basic. Um, you need some sort of equipment to work on. I literally used a VAV box that was donated to our program. I slapped a controller on it, a couple of actuators, and I did all the recording in my office at home, which of course meant that the unit was not fully functional. So our troubleshooting opportunities were minimal, but there were still things there that we could have caused challenges to happen, wiring issues, which is what we chose, um, on several different devices. Um, just had to do a little bit of imagination that it was actually up in a ceiling somewhere. And if you have lab equipment that you have access to record, that makes that all the easier. You could even use a student setup from one class, as your recording base, however it works for you. I did not, definitely keep it simple for your first attempt. Um, the video that I did, I anticipated, you know, 4 or 5 video segments, some links on YouTube, really straightforward and easy. Um, the truth is that it ended up including the best intro at 15 video segments. The linking was no challenge once you got used to it, but it's going to take more than you think it will to start with. So start with something fairly simple, and we'll get into that in the lessons learned. And don't think that you need a lot of fancy, expensive equipment to be able to do this. I literally did this with my old cell phone, which was a Galaxy S9 that died on me, but the camera still worked. So I've been using it for video presentations and Zoom meetings like this, actually. But I used it for proper recording. I used a Bluetooth headset for my microphone, and it worked okay. Was it professional grade results? No, but it was passable. And as one of the things that Candace pointed out in her presentation from ACP yesterday, these students are used to social media posts as far as videos go. So they're not looking for super professional quality, not knocking um, the people who are putting out some really amazing stuff on a lot of the social media platforms, but they're also just using cell phones to record this. So you're really on the same level as what the students are expecting as far as hardware goes. And you can always grow later. Now, I did use some video editing software. I chose DaVinci Resolve after doing some minor research. Chose that one mostly because it was free. I didn't have time to be able to get to my school's video editing lab, even if it was open. Our videographers at our school are booked out for 4 months because of 2020. So I had to do it all myself. I've never before this done any video editing. So it is something that you can learn. I'm not going to lie, it's frustrating. But as Brian will tell you, in any project-based learning environment, that frustration is key to learning. So, and I also needed some screen recording software because I needed to show the programming side. I used Flashback Express, but if you aren't using or need to record your computer's view of something, like a programming tool like I did, or a software analysis tool like you can plug into some of the higher end furnaces and rooftop units, things like that, you may not need that. Any questions so far, Brian?
Sorry, I was on mute. I don't see any questions yet. Oh, actually, just got one from Ted. What version of DaVinci Resolve did you use?
I think I am using 16 point something. It's literally the latest version downloaded off their website. Nothing special to it.
And to Bob Clark's question, no, I don't have a tie on today, Bob.
Indeed, he does.
That's all we've gotten so far.
All right. All right. So I used YouTube as the presentation method because I knew that it was possible to do the choose your own adventure through that. You can just do a quick YouTube search for choose your own adventure. And there are a number of different mystery or fantasy type videos that you really get to choose and go through. And it's very like some of the older, sorry, I'm dating myself here, maybe some of the DOS or very early Windows-based games that you could play that were just, you're at a fork in the road, choose left or right sort of concept. Now, YouTube isn't super, I mean, it does work, and it actually is quite easy to implement, but YouTube does have a couple of requirements that will catch you in the backside if you're not careful. Each video segment must be 25 seconds long. Even your transitionary videos, like in this one, choosing between your troubleshooting your inputs or your outputs. And for those of you who went through the videos, you may have noticed that we transitioned to a black screen there for 10 seconds or so at the end of some of those segments. That was simply because my video recording segments were too short, and I was running low on time and needed to extend those videos without taking the time to completely re-record them. And actually, I think that black screen at the end is a useful tool in and of itself. When you upload the videos, you have to set them as not for children. YouTube asks, is this recording suitable for children or something along those lines? And you have to select that it is not. Otherwise, it will not let you set link cards at the end. On those videos, YouTube is very careful about curating what children are and are not allowed to link to. So if you want to be able to do it, you have to set it as not for children. And I would suggest setting the video segments to unlisted if you're going to try this. Technically, it's optional, but if you don't want a segment in the middle of your troubleshooting plan to show up in the middle of somebody's search on YouTube, you have to set it to unlisted or private. And if you set it up to private, then your account will be the only one that can view it, which then makes it almost entirely useless for your students. The way I have implemented this for one of my classes is I put the opening introduction link into our online learning platform and just let them start from there and go through it. Everything else should be linked off of your initial video, so you shouldn't need to provide any additional links after that. Okay. Obviously, when you do something like this, you're going to have some lessons that come up. And boy, I'll tell you what, I learned some big ones. First one, I am not a professional videographer. I am not a professional video editor. And I suspect that most of you in the audience aren't either. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. It does take some time and it does take some stick-to-itiveness. It isn't a super easy project, but it is doable. So my best advice, if you decide to do something like this, is to start off with something simple. This VAV, we had 4 things that we could look at and troubleshoot. So it wasn't super complicated. The linking and layout for the links for the videos, a little bit more so. So keep your project simple till you get used to the linking. Also start off with something that you yourself are familiar with. There is nothing worse than trying to teach someone on something you aren't familiar with, you aren't comfortable with. So for your first project, if you are really comfortable with electrical circuits, start with an electrical circuit. If you're really comfortable with furnaces or lighting controls, start with those. Don't start with something that is new or even fairly new to you. You'll just be making your life harder. Also, try to think in A and B choices. The way YouTube limits the linking at the end of the videos pretty much limits you to 2 choices on those cards. You can inject links earlier on in the video, some title cards and things like that, but they're more subtle of a link. So maybe they're not the best option for, at least not for the student's first attempt at this. Maybe later on, once you and the students are a little bit more comfortable, you can start injecting some additional options. Add 20 seconds or so or more of just a black screen or blue screen, whatever your favorite color is, right at the end of each video. This will ensure that those link cards, when they come up, will have that black background, and the student inherently knows that, oh, this is when I've got to choose what I'm going to work on next. And it also gives them time for that choice. As those of you who went through the videos noticed, you may not have been able to completely watch the entire video because those cards popped up partway through towards the end of the video and blocked maybe what you were trying to see at that time. So that black really serves a couple of purposes that way. And my last big takeaway from this is editing takes time. Once you get used to it, it's a little bit better, but it definitely does take some time. So allow yourself that time to work with. And also for those of you who have seen my presentations before, you are aware that I absolutely deplore PowerPoint. I try and keep it short and sweet. I'd much rather have conversations around this. So that is the end of my presentation. So I know we've been looking at questions before. Does anybody have any other questions? Or what you thought, for those of you who did go through the video series, what did you think of the series? Anything you want to see?
If you have questions for Robert, go ahead and put them in the question and answer session, please. Robert, how long did it take you to do that video that you put together?
So the total of those video series, if you actually add up the time of the videos, I think it's somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes total time. But in actual doing it time, um, it probably took me about 40 hours. Now, some of that was definitely initial setup of the equipment to be recorded. Some of it was doing research and learning how to use the software or the video editing tool. Um, and some of it was overcoming some fairly minor technical difficulties, like the fact that my um, uh, camera didn't want to use my Bluetooth as a microphone input, things like that.
So we have some questions coming in now. First of all, Bob Clark says, nice work, Robert. So you've got a kudos there. And Larry Chang is asking, did you try some version of this during the past school year?
No, this was, I have it implemented in my building automation system class where we are currently talking about VAVs, and the project for that class is actually for the students to wire up, program, and then do some additional background work like graphics on a VAV box. So late on in that class, I'm hoping to have time for them to actually get into some troubleshooting where I get to go in and screw up their perfectly working systems. I don't enjoy torturing my students. Why would you ask that?
Brad Pruill is asking, where does he find the video series that you've done?
That's a great question, Brad. So the link was at the bottom of this description, but I'll tell you what, I can just toss it right into the chat here and now. Oops. I just sent it to just Brian. So come on. There we go. So you should have that link in the chat now. If you haven't already viewed the videos, feel free to do so.
Ted is asking, we have a couple more questions first, but is it possible to show some of the video while we're together since we have some time?
Sure, I think we can manage that.
Let me field these other questions first before you do that, Robert. Okay, Stephen Chow from Honolulu, I'm guessing, so from almost halfway around the world, is asking, can you get a link to your video?
Link
and
is
I guess you just
in
shared
the chat.
It.
Yep.
Let's see. Di Matteo is saying, his question is, if before the COVID-19 pandemic, were you doing videos, or was this pandemic the start or the impetus to accelerate the use of that learning tool?
That is a fantastic question. So I have done some videos in the past that are very specific tutorial based on programming specific blocks or programming specific sequences. But no, this is definitely the most video recording I have ever done in my life, as long as you don't count when my parents recorded me at karate when I was a kid.
I'd like to see that video.
No.
Connie Keene, okay. Connie Keene is saying 40 hours with an exclamation mark. How long did it take you for the next videos? Was that just the first one, 40 hours?
This is, no, that was the entire video series, including the best intro, the intro to the problem, all of the troubleshooting of the problem, and figuring out how to lay out, oh, come on, don't do that. Lay out and link the videos themselves as for the troubleshooting exercise.
Robert McNabb is also giving you a kudos. Excellent work, Robert. Larry Chang is asking, are there any significant differences between using YouTube versus Vimeo and linking it into Canvas or any other LMS system?
So this is, by the way, the layout that I figured out for the flow for the videos. So you can see that there was some thinking involved there. Actually, very similar thinking to how you do block-based programming as a side note. As far as Vimeo, I've never used Vimeo. And for linking into Canvas, or which is what we use for our LMS, or some other learning management tool, I literally just have it linked in as an external URL. So that is, in Canvas at least, it's about as simple as you can get for creating those links. Then it just jumps them straight over to YouTube, and away they go through the series.
Janie Page is sending a quick note to everybody to remind you that if you have any questions about internships at LBNL, the representative is now available at LBNL's booth to answer questions, and the deadline to apply is January 12th of this month. Let's see, Robert McNabb is asking, or saying and asking, I subscribe to the unofficial MCC mechanical page. Will you be posting additional content there in the future?
Yes, it is our intention to continue making videos oriented towards our labs as preparation for students to be able to get into labs, and anybody who would have interest in using those videos, you are more than welcome to do so.
That is all the questions we have at this point, Robert. I guess if you can share the video to give people a taste of it who have not seen it.
I absolutely can. Okay. I am going to. All right. Sorry, I had to find back to the Zoom presentation. And as you are all aware, sometimes audio works well in these, sometimes it does not. I have skipped the best intro, which is where that link goes directly to, so that we can get into the problem itself.
Robert, let's see, Robin McClellan to say you have to check use computer audio when you share the screen. We're not getting sound from your video.
Oh, thank you. Share computer sound. We'll back this right up. I will note that being a little bit theatrical with this usually helps to bring the students in. Don't get me wrong, they will probably make fun of you if you are using your own videos when you do this, but you've got to bring them in somehow. So having some sort of a narrative is a good thing as well. I'm glad you're here. We're having a problem. The CEO of the company is complaining that his office is cold all the time. Okay, so that's a problem. We need you to solve it. We have this VAV box here. It is the only VAV that serves his office, and we don't have time to dig into it ourselves, so that's why we called you in to solve the problem. If you are not familiar with what a VAV box is, I suggest you pause the video at this juncture and click on the link that describes or that talks about what a VAV box is, which is the next item. If you don't need that, if you're ready to go on this, then there are going to be some videos that are going to, or some links that are going to pop up that will let you choose what you want to examine first on this box to try and ascertain what the problem is. So, on that note, thank you for your help and good luck. I'm glad you're. So, Where do you folks want to go? Do you want more data on the issue, or do you want to know what a VAV is?
We're saying Larry's asking for more data, please. More data, Robert.
More data. All right. So the more data leg of our journey, by the way, does imply that we have an idea what a VAV box is. So you decided you wanted more information about the complaint and the history of this system. I will tell you, yep, totally just lost my train of thought. I'll be back. The system has been installed for 3 years, which was when the building was opened. The CEO just started complaining the beginning of this week. We're on a Thursday now. So it's a fairly recent complaint. We did change out their thermostat about a month ago, but this was the first time that they complained. So we have seen fairly stable temperatures from their office, though they are always complaining about it being cold. So I believe that's everything we have. All right, and from here we'll move on to the troubleshooting core. The other information that this doesn't state that I had actually planned and got truncated down due to time was to include that, or include the idea that, or the later on information that the CEO has actually been on vacation for the last month and a half. So this is the first time that that room has actually been occupied. That's why the issues started at that point.
We have an open question, Robert. I guess this is for the Best Center team from Russ Hamilton. Can we post the videos and other instructional video resources into the instructor section of the Best Center webpage? And that may be an open question for Larry and the team.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why we couldn't. So I suspect that they will end up there before too long.
An anonymous attendee is asking for a little more information about VAVs, if you have it in your videos.
Absolutely, we can drop back a little bit here. And that is one of the other great things about doing this quickly on YouTube is you have the ability to jump in and out as that will let you choose it's useful for you. So if you missed something, you can rewatch a video. You can also go back and choose another option if you decided that what you did wasn't the right choice. So this is the what is a VAV section. So for those of you, so you need to know what a VAV is. Feel free to critique my presentation and correct me where I'm wrong, because hey, I'm wrong all the time. VAV boxes. So VAV boxes are part of the category of devices called air terminal units that are commonly used for zoning in medium and large commercial buildings. Buildings such as office buildings, skyscrapers, and schools. Not the only method by any means, but one of the common ones. So this is an example of a VAV box, okay? VAV stands for variable air volume. What happens with this system, this is an end use, end zone device. So we are providing primary air that comes into the box here on this end, is controlled by a damper internally and passes over, in this case, a reheat coil as the final stage before it transitions out to the diffusers, okay? Airflow is generally monitored and controlled so that we know how many CFM are being pushed into the space at any given time. Our reheat valve serves in combination with an actuator to add heat to the space when required, because our primary airflow is intended for cooling. So it is in most situations somewhere in around 55 degrees, which gives us good cool air, which can effectively cool the space. When we need heat, we simply open up our valve to reheat using hot water, or in some cases steam. though hot water is the more common at this juncture in time, at least in the Midwest. The damper modulates to maintain airflow set points. There is typically 3 airflow set points, a maximum cooling set point and a minimum cooling set point. Maximum is intended for when the space needs more cooling because there's more people or there's a heavy heat load. Minimum cooling is a setting typically used when the space is satisfied or close to satisfied and doesn't need much heat or much cooling to kind of maintain it at a proper level while still providing enough fresh air to the space so that it doesn't feel stuffy. There is a third set point that is frequently used, which is a reheat CFM, and that controls the system to a specific CFM and eliminates the airflow variable for heating modes. All right, that pretty much finishes the explanation there on what VAV boxes is, or most of that video. And as you can see, now the participant is railroaded into going in to discover more information, the last video that we actually watched. So, and we can go through and continue on. We'll skip this one. Troubleshooting core. This is one of those videos where I had to add some black screen time right at the end. Basically, where you're going to, this is where you really get to start choosing what you want to examine. So, ready to start troubleshooting? Where would you like to start on this device? Do you want to start with the inputs, the real world data that's being monitored by the controller? Or do you want to start with the outputs, where the controller is making an effect on the real world? So what do we think? Do you want to look at inputs or do you want to look at outputs? Ted wants data. All right, Ted, we'll give Ted some data. Oh, you want to test your inputs. I will warn you, for those of you familiar with Chromecast, this whole choose your own adventure thing does not work in a Chromecast environment. It has to be on a computer that is giving you full access either through a YouTube app on your phone or tablet or through the YouTube webpage. Casting it removes all of those links that you can get to. So, what input would you like to test? The discharge air temperature sensor or the room temperature sensor? And here's that black screen again.
Ted says the room temperature sensor, please.
Room temperature. Ted, have you watched this video already?
No.
You wish to test the function of the thermostat. I will pinch the bulb of the thermostat, the thermistor itself, with my fingers to increase the measured temperature. Adding heat to room temperature sensor. And you can see this is where I switched over from camera type recording to recording the video using my screen capture tool. And yes, it did take a little bit of finagling back and forth in the video editing software for the transition, but not much actually. This segment is real time. One thing that I intend to adjust removing this segment is highlighting the room temperature sensor input on the screen so that the students really know where to look if they're not familiar with this particular program. Heat source from room temperature sensor. To complete our testing of the thermostat, we need to test the function of the potentiometer. To do that, I must return the cover to its normal position. For those not familiar, the potentiometer on a thermostat is frequently used for set point adjustment, so that the occupants of the room have some either full control of the set point within a given range or an adjustment off of a base set point. Sorry for anybody wearing headphones. As we can see, currently the set point adjustment is all the way at minimum. We will change it to neutral. Then we will change it to positive. And then we will return it back to minimum. Adjusting set point control from minimum to neutral. From neutral to maximum. All right. So at this juncture, if you were attentive, you've probably discovered what the problem is with this unit. But maybe you want to look at more. Do we want to go back to troubleshooting core and watch some dampers or heating up some other thermostats? Or do you think we found the problem with the thermostat, and it is with the thermostat? By the way, there are multiple issues here, only one of which are addressed in the video. I think we're coming closer on time, and I'm not getting any feedback or direction here.
Connie says the thermostat.
All right. We're going to accuse the thermostat, kind of like in Clue. So you think you've sorted out the problem with this particular VAV box, and you believe it is to do with the wiring of the thermostat. There you are correct. If you look closely at the wiring in the thermostat and the wiring on the controller, you'll notice that the set point and the temperature sensor wires have been swapped. So we have been monitoring the room set point as the temperature. The set point doesn't change until someone fiddles with the knob, so the system is always thinks a constant temperature. And because of the temperature or the resistance range on the potentiometer, that was always below or at a high temperature, below 10,000 ohms of resistance. So the system always believed that it was warm and that it needed cooling. So that was why the office was always cold. Well, and of course, we go on to congratulate the participant for choosing the right answer. And I also included a link that could take them back and they could restart the troubleshooting exercise from the beginning if they had interest in doing so. One thing you may have noticed with the congratulations, you got it right, was that it gave reasons that were completely different from what you could actually see on the screen. And that was because I made the mistake of recording that segment before I'd actually recorded the test segments. So that's one thing that you've got to be careful of with your sequencing. Either record your test segments first so that you are giving the right reason that they got it correct or incorrect in the final segments, or do something like I never do and script ahead of time.
Larry Chang is saying, good job. And do you have any thoughts about equipment which might be loaned out to students for installation-based activities?
That's an interesting idea. What kind of equipment are you thinking about there, Larry? I need a little bit more information, I think. We know we can loan controllers out to students as long as we're using software that either they have access to via some sort of remote server or something like that, or free programming tools like the Medelica tool or EasyIO or contemporary controls tools, things like that.
Larry's saying lighting is probably easier and cheaper to loan out, but that's not HVAC.
That you are correct, Larry. That isn't HVAC. However, one thing to keep in mind with building automation systems is one, we're not always limited to dealing with HVAC programs. So building automation system often also includes lighting controls these days. So being able to loan it out to somebody or loan a lighting control system out where you just have a simple light, an occupancy sensor, a light switch, maybe a daylight harvesting sensor, um, I think would be actually a brilliant application for this type of thing, because you can then choose, they can practice their programming on digital inputs and outputs, turning the light on and off via the switch or the occupancy sensor. You can teach occupancy versus vacancy comparisons. And you could add in a little blurb on how that could affect an HVAC system. And if you included a light level sensor, then you could even deal with analog inputs. Possibly PID loop tuning, though I think that's a little bit more than most lighting control systems are going to be required. But yeah, you definitely could do that.
Any other questions for Robert? There's not a question, but a statement. You've been drafted, Robert. You're in the best center army now.
Well, I think that happened a long time ago, Larry. All right. Well, unless anybody else has, looks like we do have one more question. Nope, just a comment. All right. Well, if we don't have any further questions, I think that pretty much concludes the presentation. That video is going to be live. I don't intend on changing that entry point, so that link should always work for you. It may catch some updates throughout the troubleshooting sequence as I make adjustments, re-record videos like the Why You Got It Right section as time goes on and as I refine the video. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. And if you have any feedback, positive or negative, or want to talk further, I will be in the Meet the Speakers room after this.
Hey, I'll say great presentation, Robert. I think that was a very innovative and engaging way for students to interact with the video. So I'm very impressed with that. Nice job.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you to everybody else who offered positive comments earlier and throughout the chat.